Welcome, everybody, to the Image and Wire show. My name is Jake Fish, and I'm the host of the show and the editor of the Image and Wire. And I'm really excited to have Kelly Parker from Siemens Healthineers on the show with us today. Kelly is the Senior Product Marketing Manager for MR at Siemens, and she has a really interesting career on both the commercial and the clinical side of imaging, which is really cool to me. And I can't wait to learn about all the things that she's learned along the way. So without further ado, welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jake.
It's good to have you here. And I noticed you have an accent, and I want to learn about all this MR stuff. But before we do that, I've been dying to find somebody to ask this question to, and that's it's about Ted Lasso. And what I'm curious is, what's the chances that a guy like Ted Lasso could actually come in and effectively manage a English Premier League team without the fans just burning down the stadium?
Well, I'm no expert in football or soccer, as you call it here, but I can't imagine that Ted Lasso would last too long in the UK Premier League for sure.
All right, maybe he'd make some friends along the way, though.
Yeah,
Good guy. All right, great. Okay, so back to the MR stuff. Curious, maybe you could share a little bit about this this kind of dual path to your career right now on the technology side, and then into commercial, and maybe some of the stuff you've learned along the way.
Sure, yeah. So I trained as a technologist, or as we call them in the UK, radiographer. And I started my career out and moved into MRI quite quickly. A big interest of mine. I continued and undertook a master's degree in the subject. And from then I went on to work in not just a clinical teaching hospital, but also in the research area as well. And that's what kind of took me to my path at Siemens. I became an application specialist. Soon moved on to look after the wider application specialist team in Great Britain and Ireland. And then I had a great opportunity to come to the US and try something very different, still in MRI, so still in the area where I hold my passion, but on the product side. So very exciting to not just be involved in the sales and marketing aspect, which is a total different side of things from me coming from a clinical world. But also then to get involved with some exciting new innovations within Siemens and MRI in particular.
So I'm curious, during this time, really on both sides, I'm sure you've seen some really great evolutions in MR technology, and then some areas where maybe up until recently, it hasn't really been able to break those barriers. So I'm curious if you could talk about some of the key milestones that you've seen, and then maybe what's next, or what you see as the next areas to evolve.
Yeah, I mean, the one really exciting aspect of MRI and why I've continued to keep close to it and work within it is the fact that it's constantly changing. It's a far cry from what it was 20 so years ago. It keeps growing, it keeps building in terms of the applications that can be undertaken, and also the different body examinations and the areas in which it finds itself being really the kind of key examination of choice. However, there are situations, and many patients are affected, whereby access to MRI isn't necessarily an option, just because of perhaps their location, or perhaps just as a result of who they are, how they're built. So we know now, certainly in the US, there's at least 50% of the population that is underserved by MR. They'd have to travel long distances to be able to go and reach it. And not always, even if they can, it means it's a viable procedure to keep having undertaken, should their treatment plan be something that's required in the long term for them to have access to.
Does Siemens have a product that kind of you use for those types of patients, or those types of settings where you're trying to expand that access?
Well, it does now, yes. So, I mean, one of the key features of our newest system to our MR portfolio, the Magnetom Free Max, was built right from the ground up, with a real focus on ensuring that it had a main role to play in accessibility. So expanding access was kind of a key feature for it. And every new feature that has come with that system that has really kind of, I suppose, looked at it's a real difference from what we're used to seeing. So we're used to seeing magnets become higher and higher in field strength, and we're used to the features very much allowing more and more capabilities. But this system is very much around routine work that needs to be undertaken, the majority of cases, and ensuring that all patients and all customers from different target markets really have an accessible way of either having MRI themselves in a facility, or certainly bringing it closer to the facility and making access easier.
You think about the settings that the Freemax MR kind of best fits into, or the situations where you hear about what they need to be doing and what their kind of current realities are. Where does the Magnetom Free Max fit best into?
Okay, so I suppose there's kind of three different areas that we talk about. The first one is to make it a something that's very versatile, that means it can be sited in easier locations. So what we're thinking here is very much outside the traditional facility, the hospital facility. So it could be like an outpatient clinic, it could be an orthopedic doctor's office. It could be a pain management clinic where they're treating patients with back pain, or, I mean, it could also be in hospital facilities themselves, but perhaps in non-traditional positions within that facility. So not in the radiology department as we're used to seeing, but perhaps even in the ED or even in the ICU as well.
That's amazing.
And I suppose thirdly, just to mention that in that hospital facility, the features of the Magnetom Free Max also lend itself to new clinical applications. So scanning different parts of the body in different ways that perhaps you wouldn't have traditionally seen MR as being a perfect fit for.
It's so funny because you have this kind of, or at least for me, have this very kind of specific idea of like what an MR is and how it can be used. And you mentioned earlier the magnet and the low field magnet, and kind of that being one of the core things that has allowed this kind of new flexibility. Are there other technical components, well, and then built around that magnet and then separate from that magnet that allow this the expansion to new settings?
Sure. So I suppose arguably the most exciting feature of the system has been the size of the patient bore. Typically today we sell, as other MR vendors sell, is a magnet the size of around 70 centimeter bore, which can fit reasonably large size patients in. But the Freemax takes this another step further. So the bore size of this magnet is 80 centimeters. So really, even severely obese patients can fit into this system. At 70 centimeters, sometimes a patient can fit in, but it makes it a challenge to try and scan certain areas like a shoulder, for example.
Mm.
Whereas the Magnetom Free Max gives lots of room around the patient and also enables them to move so that a coil can be positioned in those more lateral areas of the body as well. So that's one exciting feature that not just helps with severely obese patients, but of course anxious and claustrophobic patients. And it can also, I suppose, be considered to reduce the age of perhaps a young patient, a pediatric patient requiring a general anaesthetic. The openness of this scanner can perhaps mean that the child is more comfortable in lying within the magnet itself and not requiring an anaesthetical station. There's another key area, I suppose, relating to the magnet design, as you asked, and that's the magnet technology itself. With the Free Max, there's a big change here, and we use what's called dry cool technology. And one of the biggest things with a magnet, and one of the ongoing costs with a magnet, is the requirement for liquid helium to make it a superconducting system. With this system, instead of needing helium refills with thousands of liters of helium. This one has everything in it from the beginning, and then the magnet itself is fully sealed. So for certain reasons and in certain points in the magnet lifetime, when you might have traditionally had to lose some of that helium, in this system, the technology itself enables that helium that's in there to be recycled. And it's a very small amount. So in terms of the overall cost of the system and the life cycle cost of that system, that's massively reduced for Free Max.
Absolutely. And I'm sure it makes it far more feasible for a pain clinic or something like that to
Absolutely,
places
yeah.
like that.
And thinking about locations, very rural locations, where it's difficult to actually physically get helium to those parts. So one other really exciting and key feature about this system is when we talk about being able to cite MR scanner, sometimes it's the case that the room is too small or it's too difficult to put an MRI scanner in a particular place due to the infrastructure requirements and installation requirements of a system. The focus with Magnetom Free Max has been to make it our most compact MRI scanner. So in terms of its weight, in terms of the room square footage that it can fit in, and in terms of how easy it is to get into that room, have all been focused upon to ensure that the square footage is the smallest possible, and Magnetom Free Max fits in room sizes of under 250 square feet. The system itself is our lightest. It weighs under 7,000 pounds. And in terms of getting it into rooms, it can actually fit in through standard hospital doorways, or even in some standard large lifts that you would typically move equipment around in. So really cool features in that space. But the most important thing really is the fact that it doesn't need a quench pipe. I mentioned the Seal for Life magnet design, and a quench pipe is something, especially if the system is supposed to be situated fairly in the middle of a building, you always have to have a quench pipe traditionally to have somewhere for that helium to go should it need to be quenched. So an expensive feature and an additional time feature of most systems is the quench pipe, and the Magnetom Free Max doesn't need one. So a really great advantage there in terms of those siting and installation times and costs.
So then there's also kind of the human side, right? Where a pain clinic maybe is hasn't really tried to figure out how to maintain a team of MR technologists. How did you overcome that barrier?
Yeah, so MR technologists are an expensive commodity, and they're also, because of the increase in demand for MR scanners, and the number of patients to be examined every year, this is increasing. So it's not sometimes just a case of not being able to find a technologist, but someone with that level of experience to use a high-end system. So what we have incorporated with Magnetom Free Max is a new platform, a new user interface that really does enable customers and technologists of any level to be able to scan very basic exams. So a totally kind of dressed down interface with a much more more automated and less intensive from the technologist's perspective.
That's amazing, and really an important part of the total package, of course, if you're going to be expanded to new settings. Curious, what type of dog do you have?
Sorry about that.
It's
It's a
okay.
Labrador. It doesn't have a mute button, I'm sorry.
No, neither does mine. So don't worry about it. And that's really the best part of these types of shows. So I'm sure he or she's a really good dog.
He'll be in trouble later.
So so when you're talking to any of these new types of or actually really any type of provider who might be taking on the Free Max, and you're having this conversation with them, what are the things that they really ask about most commonly? Understand that there's kind of a lot of new involved with it.
Sure. So the most common kind of question or state or comment around the Free Max is around its field strength.
Mhm.
As system vendors, we've been pushing higher and higher field strengths traditionally over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And so Magnetom Free Max is really going in reverse now. The field strength of this system is 0.55 Tesla. And the way Siemens have made that possible with this system is purely by everything else that we've been innovating and delivering on our latest systems. So digitalization has been key. And what we've done is incorporate all of our latest innovations, features to ensure that on the image processing, image acquisition side, that these features enable image quality to be of a level that is diagnostic and of an acceptable level for our customers and the users to be happy with, and obviously for radiologists to report on. And this includes features like our latest and newest deep learning technology.
Mhm.
So this is AI based software which enables the images to not just not have the issue of losing signal, but also gaining resolution. So that trade-off that technologists sit there on a daily basis and try and juggle when they're optimizing a protocol, this is kind of taking that problem away from them. This is really ensuring that the signal is boosted to its maximum and that the resolution of the images are as high as we would expect to see on today's traditional images.
When you look at and I know Freemax is still a new system, but when you look at the providers who've adopted it so far, where are they? Kind of what was their situation before, and how are they using it right now?
Sure. So we're seeing system installations both on the clinical and research side,
Mhm.
in a pediatric hospital, in an ED. And I suppose what's most exciting about the system is where we're starting to sell it in these non-traditional markets. So these new markets for us. So spine clinics and orthopedic centers as well. So that's where we're seeing it at the moment. We have lots of customers very interested. Sadly, RSNA didn't happen in person last year, so we're delighted to be able to have a mock-up version of the system on our stand this year. So we expect the interest that we've seen in these early months since the system's been FDA approved. We're expecting to see lots of interest at RSNA, and it will be great to really be able to let customers, see the size of that bore, to get their hands on the coils, and to really to be able to experience what Freemax has to offer.
So I can't wait to see it. So lastly, so you have this. We told the story about kind of the evolutions that have happened so far, and then really just with this one system, so many kind of examples of breaking barriers, whether it's on the magnet technology or the algorithms or the form factor. When you look up into the next, say, 5 to 10 years, what type of evolutions are you seeing in the future?
Okay, so I mean the Magnetom Free Max is the first of its kind in our group of what we're calling high V MR scanners.
Mhm.
High V stands for high value, and it's this combination of this field strength, 0.55 Tesla, and digitalization. So this is the start of a new family. So
Mm.
from our point of view, there's lots of exciting things to come in that direction. Um, I think we're going to very much see it happen from both ends. So we're talking now about this more accessible, this more affordable system. But I also see, if you think about our latest releases on the higher field strength, so we now have a 70 clinical system, an MMR system, so a PET MR scanner,
Mm.
and 3T really is very much a system of interest for our hospital and high end customers. So I think we're going to now see very much both ends of the spectrum progressing, so that we can continue to feed and develop on the research side and the high end customer side, but also taking these systems like the Free Max to all patients and all customers that need access to MRI.
Absolutely, and I mean, there's so much, like you talked about earlier, so many patients and providers who would benefit from having an MR. And something like this can really help break that barrier, which is special. And I would say that for the folks who are listening, if what Kelly described kind of fits your setting or kind of what you're looking for your next or first MR, and you do happen to be at RSNA, go check out that the sample system out there and reach out to Kelly and her team and learn more about it. And Kelly, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure, and it's really neat to hear about kind of all the innovations that you're doing and all the innovations that came into the system. So kudos to you.
Thank you so much, Jake. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak about Magnetom Free Max with you.
All right. And thank you everybody for joining us. Take care till next time.